Hello, everyone. I hope that you can all hear me right now. It's nice to see the numbers go up and seeing so many of you join us today for the Code First Girls MOOC this evening. Again, great to see so many of you. Just as an introduction, backstage you have me, Pauline from Code First Girls. I am a Code First Girls brand ambassador. So if you have any questions about Code First Girls or other upcoming classes and events, please put them in the YouTube chat and I'll try my best to reply to them during the session. Oh, it's nice to see some comments already on our YouTube stream. Keep them coming. So just a bit about myself. I've been working in the tech industry for the past 3 years now as a site reliability engineer and a DevOps engineer in 2 different organizations. And I'm actually in between roles right now until I start my new adventure next week. So I'm very excited about that. And on the side, I love building and being part of technical communities. And I've worked with Code First Girls for over the past 5 years as a mentor, instructor, and an ambassador. So I really advocate for everything that they do. And, you know, Code First Girls have absolutely changed my life. So I'm super happy that you're all here to change your lives as well. So just as a reminder, Code First Girls will be running other MOOCs throughout the summer. So please check out our future MOOCs on our website. I'll put a link in the channel chat after this. These sessions will just give you a great insight into technical languages or concepts, and it'll just help you get through the door if you want to get into tech. And just to let you know that the YouTube video will be up for a week or 2 after the session today. So if you do want to rewatch this content, you can do so by visiting the same YouTube link. And now onto the session. Code First Girls are delighted to partner with Dell Technologies for the Dive into Web Dev with Dell series of the MOOC and project sessions. We've been working with a brilliant group of Dell volunteers so that they'll be able to deliver the Code First Girls content to our community. And this evening, you'll have Adeline leading the JavaScript 1.0 session with Sophia, Mark, Paige, and Gayrant, supporting her behind the scenes and helping with audience questions in the chat. Without further ado, on to you, Adeline.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pauline. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on JavaScript with Dell Technologies. So as Pauline mentioned, I'm Adeline. I'm from Dell Technologies, and I'll be your instructor tonight. And with me tonight, we've got Paige, Sophia, Mark, and Geraint, and they are also from Dell Technologies. And you can see them here on the slide. So you can see we're all from different parts of the companies with different roles. Just a very brief overview on Dell Technologies. Dell Technologies provide the infrastructure for organizations to build their digital futures. So we provide digital technology solutions, products, and services to drive business success. And our ultimate goal is to create the technologies that drive human progress. So as part of this, we focus on areas such as advancing sustainability, cultivating inclusion, and transforming lives. And so, for instance, we're involved in a lot of initiatives which aim at helping bridge the gender gap that we still see in the technology sector. So really excited to be here tonight to have the opportunity to partner with Code First Girls and hopefully to contribute to your own coding journey. So today, we'll give you an overview on JavaScript. So again, as Pauline said, my colleagues will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So don't hesitate to use the chat to post comments, ask questions. Okay, they will answer as many questions as possible. There are a lot of people attending the webinar, so there may be a bit of latency in answering sometimes. So just be patient a little bit. But throughout the session, they will also add tips or code in the chat to help you with coding along. So do keep an eye on the chat. Okay, so let me explain the format. We have 1 hour and a half and a lot of content. So we'll talk a little bit about what is JavaScript and how it is used. And then we'll look at some of the JavaScript basics. And we also have a bit of practice together. So for the practice, I would encourage you all to code along. You could just listen if you prefer, because as Pauline said, this will be recorded and you can rewatch later. But it will help you understand what we are doing if you actually have a go at the same time. And we won't use any text editor tonight, so you don't have to worry about downloading anything. We'll just use Chrome and a website, and we'll send a link to that later on. So I know we've got a lot of different people with different levels tonight. So again, some of you may have experience, some of you may be completely beginners. Hopefully you'll have some understanding of HTML and CSS. And so today we'll just really focus on JavaScript itself. And now we'll try and slow down a little bit, but again, do use the chat if you need any help. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start by what is JavaScript. So JavaScript is a programming language for the web, and it allows us to make a website more interactive. So you can add actions and movement, you can use clickable buttons, you can add interaction, and you can create alerts and pop-ups. And you see here highlighted the 3 key languages for web development. So let's have a look at those languages just for context. Okay, so you've got your HTML here. So that's your markup language that we use to structure and give meaning to our web content. So you can see here, for instance, we can define headers and paragraphs. And then CSS sits on top of that and provide the styling to our HTML content. So for instance, here you can see with the ID welcome, which correspond to this here. Oh, I should have said that. You can see that we've altered the font and the color here. So we formatted that. And then JavaScript here is what will allow you to make your website dynamic. So here, for instance, is taking this ID here, welcome, and we'll actually use that later on. So that'll make much more sense later on. But for now, all you need to know is it's taking that part here and it's saying to add editors. So if I run this here, you can see now I've got editors. And if you want a visual example, so that's your content, that's your formatting. And what you can do with JavaScript is you can make it, again, dynamic. You can make it move, you can make it float, just lots of things with that. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context as to why we would want to use JavaScript. So the definition of JavaScript is that it is a high-level interpreted programming language used to make web pages more interactive. So first, we're talking about JavaScript here. And I know that might sound very obvious, but just want to highlight that because sometimes people can confuse it with Java. So Java is a completely different language. So if you search for Java solutions, that won't work in JavaScript. And JavaScript has traditionally been used for front-end website development to create interactive displays. But in recent time, actually, JavaScript has actually been used more and more for back-end development, meaning that in theory, you could develop the majority of your website just using the one language. And we said in this definition that JavaScript is an interpreted language. So by this, we mean that it's something that sits in the middle of the code. So your web browser will read and translate JavaScript into something which looks like the website you're actually using. So if you think about writing code like this, so the language the computer speaks is binary code. Okay, so that's your mathematical language of ones and zeros. So you don't speak binary, and the machine can come close to understanding human languages. So for you to tell the computer what to do, you need to design a translator that can act as an intermediate step. And that's the purpose of your code. So the interpreter is a program that converts your human code, your source code, into machine code each time you run the program. And it does it one line at a time. So you may have heard of compile languages as well. And compile language will first convert the code into machine code, converts everything, and then only after that it will run it. While your interpreter runs through the program line by line and execute each comment each time. Okay, so that's the main difference. And JavaScript also runs on the client's computer. So that means that it's a computer programming language that runs inside an internet browser. So any browser can run JavaScript. And when you place JavaScript code inside your web page, when the browser loads the page, then the browser has a built-in interpreter that reads the JavaScript code it finds in the page and then runs it. And JavaScript has been one of the fastest growing languages over the past few years. And it tends to be a language of choice for many new programmers. And that's because it's not too difficult to learn compared to other languages. And there's also a big community online where you can find help when you start with a code, you can ask questions, you've got forums and so on. So it's very handy. So the most common answer to the question, what is JavaScript used for, is usually something like creating interactive web elements. And that's true, but that's not all. We've mentioned before, now you've got a lot of new libraries and frameworks which have been created, and that's allowing web developers to build a lot of backend programs with JavaScript. So you can use it to build web or mobile apps, real-time networking applications, using of chats or even games. So JavaScript is becoming just as essential for back-end web developers as it is for front-end. And you can do pretty much everything with it. And it can run on any hardware platform too. So for your hardware, you can run on your PC, on your Mac, and it also can run on any software platform. So your Linux, your Windows, and so on. And again, you don't need to download anything else to run it. Okay, so we've mentioned that JavaScript can be used as a language on its own for like game or an app, but of course, it can also be integrated into a web page. You can link your web page to make the page function in a different way. So if we look at it in more details here you've got your HTML file, which is your foundation, and you can see your tags, you've got your head, your body, and so on. And then you've got your CSS here, which is linked, and which allows you to add your formatting. Okay. And then here in green, that's where you've got your script tag, which connects and links your HTML and your JavaScript here. And you can see that script tag and that file here ends in JS for JavaScript. So they all link in through that HTML page. So that's how JavaScript works. The JavaScript file is linked to HTML and runs when our web page is up. And you can actually see JavaScript at work in the web browser. And that's done through something we call the console. So we've mentioned that JavaScript was originally designed to run in browser. So all browsers have a JavaScript engine that can execute the JavaScript code. And I'm going to show you now how to access the console. So if you take a web page, and you can do that at the same time, definitely. So I'm in Chrome just now. So if you can open Chrome too, so that it looks the same. But again, it's available in any browser. It's just easier this way. So in your internet page here, if you go right-click, inspect, you will see this page appear here. And then you've got elements here. And so you want to go to your console here. Okay, so that's your JavaScript console. And you can write your JavaScript code here. When you do that, yours may look a bit different. It might appear at the bottom of the page, for instance. So what you can do is you've got those 3 dots here. You can change on the dock side. So if you go here, for instance, it's at the bottom. I prefer to have it on the right here, but it's personal preference. Okay. On another way to get the console, just so you know how to find it, not with a shortcut. So if you go to your more tools, developer tools, you get the same. Okay, you're back to the same page with your console. If you're on a Mac, you would go to Help in the Mac menu bar, and then again select Developer Tools, and that open your developer console in a new window. Okay, so let me close that and do it again, so you can see. Right-click, inspect, and now you're at your console here. Okay, so you can now enter things in your console here. So we'll enter console log. So console log is a function which prints, so that means writes a message on the JavaScript console. Okay, so console.log, and then you've got your brackets. Okay, and in code, if you open a bracket, you close it too. So you've got them here. And I'm going to write in quotation marks. So open your quotation mark, and I'm going to write hello world. Okay, and if I enter that, now I've got hello world. So that allows you to go and check some specific lines in your code and to debug it. Just to note on that, you can also save your console. If you want to save everything you've written here, you can go right-click, save as, and you'll have a text document that you can then save on your computer. You don't have to do that as part of this session. We will share the code, so don't worry about it. It's just so you know going forward. Okay, so going back to our slides, let's just explain a bit more what the console is. So we've just shown the console, but what do we use it for? So again, if you think of JavaScript, it's a long list of steps. And we use those steps to set up site and customize it. And in order for the site to function properly, your JavaScript needs to be written in a very specific way. So within a user browser, we've got a JavaScript engine. And so here I've got my pan here, and I'm going to put my JavaScript into that. So when you're sending the content of site to user, you're sending a JavaScript file. And this is, like we did just now, it's like sending a big recipe for the kitchen to follow. And then this is made and sent out from there. Okay. But problem is if I've restarted that. If there are any typos in your code here, then your kitchen will refuse to cook it. Okay, so you need to speak to your kitchen staff directly to clarify what you meant. Okay, so that's what we do with the console. We go and speak to the kitchen if you want to clarify any issues. So basically, you use the console to check your code and then debug specific lines of code as needed. Okay, we can do that because it's an interpreted language. Remember that. So it runs line by line. So you can just pick a line and go and check it. And for instance, use console log to print the outcome. There are other things you can do, and that's what we're going to do today. So today we'll be using the console throughout the session to explore JavaScript. And in the next MOOC, that's when we'll start using the text editor. But we'll really focus on the console today. Okay, so let's dive into it and start by looking at some of the data types we can use. So we can have numbers, okay, and your numbers can be whole numbers or decimal numbers. And you can use those to do calculations, basically. So you can actually use your console as a calculator. So let's go back to our console. Okay. And now we can just do different calculations. I can do a sum, and all I do is type 10 plus 5, enter, it's 15. Okay. And I can do minus, I can do multiplication, and I can do a division. Okay. So pretty much anything I want here. Another data type is string. And string are basically characters which are stringed together. Okay, and basically it's text. That's what we use to display textual information. You can create strings with single quotes or with double quotes. It doesn't really matter. The arguments for or against, we won't go into details on that today. The only thing is be consistent. So obviously, if you open a string with double quotes, you need to end it with double quotation, but also throughout your JavaScript file, keep it consistent to make it easy to read. And so those are for text. So again, let's go back to our console to see what it looks like. You can enter it, double quote, hello, close your quote. I can enter that and it just prints hello. And I can do the same with single quotes, and it does hello. And you can see your outcome will be in double quotes because that's what JavaScript used to denote, to show that it's a string. Okay, but it's the same. So we can see that we can use JavaScript with numbers, with strings, and then we use JavaScript to make your website dynamic. So you want to get some user input to be able to make it dynamic. So you could use prompts or calculations. But what you need to do to be able to use that data is you need to be able to use it, to save it, so to use it later. So we're storing data to get it back later. So in order to do this, we have to use something called a variable. Okay, and variable is a very important concept in programming. We use variable to store data temporarily in a computer memory. So we store that value in a variable, which is like your box, and then we give it a name. So that would be your label, so you can retrieve it. So here, for instance, you've got a variable var with a label name and a value Jane. To declare a variable, you can use var, you can use let, you can use const. Okay, and there is a slight difference in scope, but again, we won't go into too many details today. In that, we'll use var throughout here because it's universal and it works in every browser. So let's go back to our console and look at this in more detail. So I'm going to clear the console. To do that, you can go right clear console, or you can do Control L. Okay, and just so you see better, make that a bit bigger so you can see. Okay, so we want to declare a variable. So we're going to go var, and then we're going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it first name. And notice here that I'm using camel case. So camel case is when you put a capital letter in each word in your name here, no space except for, so capital letter for each word except the very first one here. You could also use snake case, which would be like that. Again, whichever one you choose, just make sure you're consistent throughout your file. Okay, so we're going to use camel case here. So I've got my variable, I've got my first name, and then I want to give it a value. So I'm going to call it Jane. Okay. So now if I go back to my console log, remember I can print with my console log. So I'm going to go console log, and then I'm going to ask what is within my variable first name here. And it tells me it's Jane. Okay. What I can do too is I can change it. So for instance, I'm saying, no, actually I want my first name to be equal to Adeline. Okay, and so now that would be my first name here. Okay, a few shortcuts here to show you at the same time. See, when you're typing, you have the values appearing. So you either have whatever I've typed before, or you've got prompt as well, depending on keywords and other functions which are already set up in Java. So you can either go and select it with your mouse here, or you can use your tab key to just enter whatever's highlighted. Okay, so if I go tab, it's going to finish it for me. Also, if you want to retrieve what you've typed before, so for instance, here I'm running console log first name several times, you can use your arrows going up and down to retrieve what you've typed before. Okay, and it just makes it easier. So you don't have to type each time. You can just retrieve what you had before, and I can run it again. Okay, so on the variables names here, see there's no, you can call it whatever you want. There are some rules though. So first, really the most important rule is that they need to be meaningful. Okay? You want to make your code easy to read. So try and use a name which means something. Don't call it variable X, for instance. And then there are some rules such as it cannot start with a number, it cannot contain space, and also you cannot use reserved keywords. So keywords are tokens that have special meanings in JavaScript. So for instance, break. So and see, it's written when I try to start to type it, it's written break keywords, and it comes in purple here. Another one that we'll actually see later is if. So you wouldn't be able to use a keyword for a variable name. But apart from that, you can choose your name here. Okay, so we saw earlier, let me just go back to the slide to show you. We saw how we could use var, let, and const. So I just want to show you something with the const function here. So if I type, let me show you first. If I type var a equal 5, again, I'm kind of breaking my rules here with the variable names, but just to demonstrate. So I've stored a with the value 5, and now I'm like, no, actually, I want a to be equal to 10. Okay, now I'm going to use my console log so remember we said we could do calculations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a plus 20. Okay, so we said a equal 10, so a plus 20 should be equal to 30. We're good. So now I'm going to do exactly the same with const. Const, I'm going to call it b equal 5. And then same as before, I'm going to say, no, actually, I want b to be equal to 10. And here you can see I get a type error. Okay, so that's because you cannot reassign your const variable to different values. They're constant values. Okay, and when you do things like that, when you see you've got type errors which appear, you can actually go and investigate that error. So that's how you can use, for instance, your console to debug your code. So if I click here, I can see it's giving me more details here. It's highlighting the value 10, because saying, no, it can't be 10. You told me it should be 5. Okay. So another thing you might want to do with your data is to join string. So to put that text together. And we've got two ways to do that. We've got concatenation, which is here. And basically that's using your string, for instance, here, and using plus to join those strings. Or you can use an interpolation, which has the same outcome, but the syntax here is different. We use a backstick followed by a dollar and curly brackets. Okay, so we're going to see that in practice. So we're going to create an alert box and a prompt box with a string in each. And then we're going to create a prompt and we're going to store the answer as a variable. And finally, we'll write a message to the user using interpolation and concatenation. Okay, so let's go back to my console. I'm going to clear it, so Control L here. Okay, and I'm going to create an alert first. So alert. So I just write alert. Open and close my normal brackets here, and it's going to be a string, so I'm going to use my quotation marks here. And I'm going to say, we are, oh, I can't type, sorry, using console. Okay, so if I do that, I've got an alert here which says we are using console. Yeah. So now I want to create a prompt. So exactly the same, except I'm going to write prompt, open and close my normal brackets here, and it's a string, so I'm going to use my quotation mark. I'm going to ask, what is your name? Okay. And now I've got a prompt who's asking me my name, so I can say, my name's Adeline. Okay. But the problem is I've created a prompt, but I can't do anything with the output here because I've not stored it anywhere. Okay, so I need to store my my answer here as a variable so I can refer to it later. So I'm going to enter var, and we're going to call it first name again, equal, and then exactly the same here. I'm going to take that, my prompt. Okay, what is your name? Okay, and I'm going to enter Adeline. Okay, it's me. And then if I type first name, you see it's saying me, Adeline, because it stored the answer to that prompt as a variable. So now I can refer to it and use it for something else. So we're first going to use it as a concatenation. Okay, so I'm going to go hello plus. Okay, concatenation is just adding plus to join the strings together, and I'm going to put my variable names here, first name. Okay, and I enter that. So you see you've got them together, but you can see here there's no space. So that's one thing to be wary when you're using concatenation, is to make sure you include your space in between your strings. So I'm going to retrieve it. So I'm using my arrows up and down to go and retrieve what I've just written. And I'm going to add space here. And you can see now it looks much better. Okay. So now we can do exactly the same with interpolation. So interpolation, we start with a backstick. So depending on which keyboard you have, your backstick may be on the top left corner under your escape key. If you can find it, one of my colleagues also put it in the chat, so you can just copy and paste it there. Okay, so hello, and then to add my variable, I'm going to use, instead of using the plus here, I'm using the $sign and my squiggly brackets, okay, my curly brackets here. And within those brackets, I'm going to enter the variable that I want to use. So that's first name. And don't forget your backstick to close it. Okay, and now you can add that. So you see here, the space is directly here. So it's often easier to use interpolation because you can see straight away what it's going to look like. Why with concatenation, you need to be wary of spaces and things like that. And it's just, the code is also shorter and easier to read. Just one last thing on that. Remember how we saw earlier the difference between your data types, numbers and strings, and we saw that with your numbers, you could do 10 plus 5. Okay, so now I'm going to do 10 plus 5. I'm going to enter them as strings. So to do that, I'm putting my quotation mark around. So I'm doing 10 plus 5. If I enter that, now I'm not doing a sum anymore. I'm doing a concatenation because those are strings. Okay, and if I could also add spaces if I wanted to. Okay, so I'm just putting them together. And if you want to check the type of your data at any point, you can do type of. So say it appears here. I'm just going to bring that type of first name, and it's going to tell me it's a string. Okay. So let's move on to different data types. We're now going to look at null and undefined. And for this, we're going to use a toilet roll analogy. So you probably all remember back at the start of the lockdown, we had a wee bit of a shortage on toilet rolls. Okay, so if we have a toilet roll holder with a full roll, then we consider this to be a non-zero value. So what we mean is there is a value present in the code, and a variable has been assigned a value, and that that value is not 0, for instance. So for instance, your var first name equal Adeline, that's a non-zero value. There is a value which is not 0, which has been assigned. Here I've got an empty turret row, which has been left on the holder. So that would be your 0 value. So your variable's been assigned the actual value 0, rather than a string, for example. So for instance, your var number of rows equal 0, the number 0. Okay. Null, here you can see this row is disposed of and the holder is empty. So that would be considered a null value because there is no turret row present, but there is a space for it. Okay, we still have a placeholder here. While undefined just means there's no holder present, there's no turret row, there's nothing. So we cannot put anything there because we don't actually even have a holder here to put something here. So undefined, by default, all your variables are undefined because at the start, they've not been assigned a value, they've not been declared. While null indicates an empty placeholder. So that's really useful to use, for instance, if you want to clear the value of variables. For instance, imagine you've got a website, you want the user to select some options, and then you want to clear that selection. You can use null. Another example would be in a form. Imagine you've got those forms, you've got first name, middle name, last name. Your middle name is not mandatory. You leave that empty, that's a null. So there's a placeholder for that, but you've not entered anything. Okay, so let's look at that in the console again. So going back here, I'm going to clear that, Control L, and I'm going to create a variable, so var, which I'm going to call descendant name. And I'm going to create a prompt as we did before. Okay, so when we stored the answer to our prompt in a variable. So what is your granddaughter's name? Okay. Here you need to use double quotes, okay, in case you've been using single quotes for text, because you've got an apostrophe here, and you would need to either escape it or it's easier just to change the quotes. That JavaScript won't make the difference between the apostrophe and the quotes. Okay, so if you get an error, just make sure you've got that right. So if I enter this, I get a prompt, but instead of answering something, I'm just going to go cancel. And if I type my variable name now, you can see it returns null. Okay, because there's a space for a value. We've created that space here, but we've not actually written an answer. While for undefined, if I just write a variable, so I'm going to write missing name. Sorry, I want it as a variable, var missing name. Okay, if I enter that, it's just undefined. Okay, we've not entered anything, so there's no space even to enter a value at this point. Likewise, if I go and enter type of missing name, it's telling me that this is undefined. Okay, that's your data type. Right, so let's look now at arrays. So an array is a special variable which can hold more than one value at a time. So it's a data structure here that we use to represent a list of items. So for instance, you may have a list of products in the shopping cart, and you can use an array to store that list. It can contain different data types. You can see here, we've got strings, we've got numbers, we've got other types that we've not necessarily seen yet. We've got null here. So it doesn't have to be just strings. And one thing important to note with array is that your first index, your list, starts with 0. Okay, so it doesn't start at 1. So one way to remember that, if you think of a left in the UK, the first button in your left is 0 for ground floor. It's not 1. So it's the same here. Let's start at 0 for your first position. Okay, so again, let's go back to the console and hopefully make more sense. So we're going to create a variable, an array is a variable. So we're going to call it selected products equal. And so the structure for an array is square bracket this time. Okay, and again, just open and close your brackets straight away so that you're sure you're not forgetting to close them. So you've got your square brackets, and then you enter your values in there with comma in between. So here I'm going to enter strings because I want to buy some food. So I'm going to say flour, comma, I want some eggs, and I want some butter too. Okay, so that's my array with my comma and my square brackets. So if I enter that, and then I'm going to console log that. Console log selected products. Okay, and you can see your array here. So what it's telling you is there are 3 items in here, and if I open that, you can see your index. And remember, your first position is 0 here, and it's giving you the length here too. And then you can do lots of things with array. So one of the things you can do, for instance, if you want to display the first element in that array, you could do console log again. Where am I? Console log. Selected products. I'm just going to take the same. And what you do is in square brackets, because it's array, you can enter the position that you want to see. So I want the first one in my list, which remember is my number 0. And if I do that here, it's telling me my first one is flower. Okay. So we use this for high-level list-like objects that can be used to store multiple data types. Right, so let's sum up what we've seen until now. In JavaScript, we've got two data types. We've got primitive, which are also called value types. And on the other side, we've got your reference, which are objects. So we've discussed nearly all the primitive ones to date. We've got the numbers, strings, null, undefined. We've not seen the Booleans yet, but we'll look at this later. And then on the other side, we've seen our arrays here. Okay, and objects are variables too, but your objects can contain many values, as we've seen with arrays. Okay, so hopefully now you've got a good understanding of data types and variables in JavaScript. So now we're going to investigate them further using a sign-up form that we've created for our game. So we've created a new game. It's called Amongst Us. Any similarity to actual games out there is purely coincidental, of course. So what we need our users here to sign up using the following form. So we're going to investigate each of those fields. You can start thinking, what kind of data types you would have in each of those here. So let's get set up first before we start on the exercise. So let me grab the page. Sorry, here we go. Oh, I lost my page. Okay, sorry. So in the chat, you should have the link to this website here. If you don't have the exact same view, just make sure you've got full view. So you don't want to be in editor view, for instance, because that's just taking space on the screen that we don't need. So make sure in your view here, you're in full page view. Then we want to open our console. So right-click, inspect, and go to your console. One thing to check here is to make sure, see that red bit here? Oh, I think you're still waiting for the link. My colleagues are just going to post it just now. Okay, so I'll start again just for anyone who didn't have the link yet. So if you right-click, inspect, I'll hang on a little bit more. Okay, just let me know when you're ready. Okay, I think we're getting the link sent across. If you want, you've got the link here if you want to start typing it. So it's codepen.io.emily with an Y at the end, EMILY GF.4, and I think you've got the link now in the chat. Okay, so I let everyone open this. And okay, so you should have the full view because I think we sent the full link, but just in case, change view here should be full page view if you see something different. Okay, so let's go back to our console, inspect, go back to the console here. Okay, so one thing to check here in that red bit here is to make sure you've got this here. okay, not the top. If you've got the top, you're selected here, you will not be able to interact with the elements in the page, so none of your code will work. So make sure you're here on that bit here. Okay, so let me get back to my slides. I will see where we were. Okay, so we've got our form here, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the Elements tab here first to inspect that form. Okay, so if you select that clicky button here, and then you hover over the form, you can see that each of the elements here have name, and or they've got details here, and actually you can find the ID of your elements in your element. So if I click on this, for instance, and here you can see I've got highlighted in my elements that line here, which gives me ID, username input, and that's the ID for this. Okay, so do it again. If you don't, oh, sorry. If you don't see anything when you hover over the element, make sure you've got your clicky button selected. See how it's blue now? It's selected. Okay. So if I click on username here, it highlights it in my elements form, and I can find the ID of my element here. And you'll see that each element here have a unique ID. And what that will allow us to do is it will allow us to call an element by name and by using their unique identifier. Okay. So if we go back to our slides, okay, so for our first question, we're going to find the username input element. So we've actually just done that. And we're going to store it as a variable. And then we'll type something in there. So we're going to learn that once we have got it in a variable, we can actually go and check its content. And we'll use JavaScript, obviously, to access the content. Okay. So let's go back, element. Okay, so we've selected my clicky button. I've got it here. I've got my ID, username input here. So I'm sorry, I'm going to copy that to be able to use it afterwards. Okay, so I've copied my ID here. So how do we get a reference of this inside our console? So first thing to do is to start with document. So document is an object. And notice when I type it here, the whole document area on the left-hand side is highlighted on my screen. And that's because your JavaScript engine behind the scene has that link set up between what we see on the page and the JavaScript object. So when you type document, it recognizes that we're referring to that area of the page here. So your document object represents your web page. So if you want to access any element in an HTML page, you have to start with accessing the document object first. Okay, and so once you're within your document, there's lots of things you can do. So if I add dot, you can see now I've got a big list of things I can do within my document. And what I want to do here is that I want to get element by ID. So again, I'll use my tab here just to go a bit faster so I don't have to type everything. Tab, get element by ID. Okay, and then I want to tell JavaScript which element I want to get. Okay, so I'm going to open my normal brackets here. And then I'm going to pass on the element ID as a string. So I'm going to use my quotation mark and then just paste your element ID here. Okay. So now you can see it gives you the input we're looking for. So we told JavaScript to go and find that element. And now we want to go and access this content. But if we don't have any way here to ask JavaScript for the content because we've not actually stored anything anywhere. Okay. So you know that now to store this, we're going to use variables. Okay, so I'm going to call that var username input. So I'm just going to use the same. So for the variable name, I'm using the same as the element ID. You don't have to, but again, remember your variables names have to be meaningful. So it just helps understanding your code if you choose names like that, which easily refer to different parts of your code here. Okay, so variable username input, and then basically I'm just going to take that again. I'm going to say go to your document and then go and get that element ID here, and I'm giving you the name here of what you need to go and get. Okay, so if we want to go and check that we've successfully selected that element, then we can just type that variable name here now. Okay, and it's good practice to do that each time to go and check that you've selected it properly, because if you're typing quickly, sometimes, I mean, I know I will do typos all the time. So then if you do a typo here or here, then actually you've not selected your element ID. And then you start playing with your code and then it's not working and you try to debug and then suddenly you realize it's because you've done a typo 10 lines above. So it saves time on the long term if you go and check it each time to make sure you've selected it properly. Okay, so now we want to access the content here. So let me type something so that we can actually go and access something. So we're going to type Adeline as a username. And so to get the content of that, all I have to do is take my variable name here, and I'm going to add value. Okay, and you can see, don't forget your semicolon each time. So you can see here that it tells me it's Adeline. And if I change that, I'm going to change it to Jane. Now it says Jane. Okay, so the same as we've seen before, you can go and reassign your value with your element here, but the good the important bit here is because you've got your element ID here, you can always refer to that using this now that you've stored it as a variable. So it's a permanent reference to that object here. Okay, so we've done question 1. So now we want to do the same with question 2. Okay, so we want to find username caption elements and store it as a variable, same as here. I want to check what it says. So what is your username caption? Let's go back to elements here. I'm going to take my clicky button, okay, and then I'm going to hover here. So see, if I click on this here, in my code, under this, I've got something called username caption. Again, okay, I'm getting the ID here. And I wanted to highlight it for you. Let me just do that again. Yeah, here. See, when I highlight it here, you see that brown bit under the username field. So that's a tiny space, which is here, that you can use to add messages there. So for instance, if you want to say that username's already been taken. Okay, so we're going to do exactly the same as we done with username input. So I'm going to copy username caption. Okay, and I'm going to store this as a variable. So var. Then I'm going to give it a name, which is I'm just going to use the name of the element ID. And then I'm going to say it's equal to, go to my document, then get my element by ID here, open my normal brackets, pass it on as a string. So I add my quotes here, and then I'm just going to paste here my element ID. Okay, and it's here. If I check it, username caption here, you can see I've got it here. Okay, so same as above. Then we want to go and get the content. So we've done that with username input already, and we just added value. So let's just do the same. Username caption dot value. See, when I type here, I don't actually have value here. I've got value of, but it's probably not the same. But let's try it. Okay, username value. It returns undefined. Okay, it's not. It doesn't recognize that at all because it's undefined. So the reason is it's a different type of element here. So if you look at username, password, confirm password, those are all elements with user input. Your user will go into these fields and they will enter things, but they cannot go and enter anything in your caption here. They cannot alter that element at all. So that type of element, we need to access it differently. We need to go username caption dot inner text. Okay, and it's telling me it's an empty string because there's nothing entered at the moment. Okay, so if it's something the user type to access the content, you use value. If it's something that we type on our side, then it is inner text. Okay, so now we want to write a caption for both available and unavailable usernames using interpolation and concatenation. So let's do first, let me clear that so you can see better. Control L to clear. Okay, so let's do a concatenation first. So we want to create a variable to save our message that we want to enter. Okay, so we're going to create var username unavailable message, and see how I'm using a camel case here with lots of typo. Sorry. So username, no capital letters, then unavailable message. Okay, that's how you do your camel case here. So equal, and I'm going to say, great news, the username, and then I want to add the username that is actually going to be entered here. So For concatenation, I'm going to use plus, and then I'm going to take my, okay, I've not closed my quotes, which is why it wasn't working here. So remember to close your quotes, plus username input value, and now you can see it appearing. So username.input.value plus, open your quotes again. Don't forget your space each time to in between your quotes is available. Okay, so now I've got that message here. So what I want to do is I want to have that message appear here. So I need to set it as my message. So I'm going to access my content for my caption again. So username caption dot inner text, and I'm going to say it's equal to this variable here, username unavailable message. If I enter that, I've got it not only on my console here, and you can see it's added Jane because that's what we've entered here, but I also have it in my caption here. Okay, so now we're going to do the same, but we're going to use interpolation. So we need to store our variable first. So username available message. Oh, I've mixed them up, haven't I? That doesn't really make sense. Well, we're going to use a different message then. So for the concatenation, we're going to use backstack. Okay, and then, sorry, the username, and then remember to add your variable. You're going to go $values, squiggly brackets, and in between you can add the username input dot value, okay, because you want the value on that. Is not available. Okay, and remember to close that with your backstick too. Okay, and if now I set it, so let me just retrieve that. I'm going to set it instead to username available message, and it's telling me here. So obviously I've mixed my variables names here between unavailable or available, but the text is the same, the structure is the same. Okay, so with interpolation, you can see it's just clearer here to see how your string is going to come out. Right, so, oh, just to note as well, I think you have in the chat, you've got the link for the code if you need to refer to them. Sometimes if it goes too fast to follow on the screen, and you can see here, you've got the numbers here to see in which exercise we are on the code file. So you can use that to help you follow. Okay, so now we want to do the same with the password input element. So we'll do the same, we'll find it, we'll store it as a variable, and then we'll access the content. And we'll do the same with the caption. And then we're going to check the character length conditions. You know, in a form, you often have like a character needs to be, 8 characters minimum. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so let me clear that, Control L. Okay, so element, click button, I want to go and check what the element ID is for my password. And sure enough, it's called password input. So that's easy to remember. And then under that here, you've got your password caption. So same principle, copy this, go back to your console and declare it as a variable. So var password input equal document dot, get element by ID, my normal brackets, as a string, I'm going to put password input, and I'm going to check it. All good. And let's do the same now with password caption. So I'm just going to retrieve what I've just put. Because the name is so similar, it's quite easy to just go and check it. So var password caption equal document get element by ID, and I want to refer to my password caption element ID. And yeah, I typed that properly. So if I check password caption, it's all here. Okay, so let's access the content. So try and remember. So this one for your password input, what are you going to use for the content? You're going to use password input dot value. And just now it's empty, so it's telling me, oh, I've got an empty string here. Now for the caption, I want to go password captions dot inner text. Yeah. So another thing I can do is actually go and check the length of my password input. Okay, so if I go password input dot value, and then I can add another dot, and I can access here even more functions. So here I want to grab the length of that. So it's telling me it's 0 because I've not entered anything. So let me enter something. So I'm actually entered the word something here. So password input value length, now see, it's saying 9. Okay, so now I've got my length here. I can go and check whether it's more or less than a specific value. So if I go password input value length, I want to check whether it's less than 8. Oops, what did I type? Less than 8 is going to tell me false because it's more. If I can do the same, I can check whether it's more than 8, and it's going to tell me true. Or I could even check whether it is less than or equal, equal to 8. And it's telling me false. Okay, so you can see that JavaScript is using those true and false statements here to check the length. And we can actually get JavaScript to do a lot of things just using those true and false statements here. So we wanted to check the password satisfies different character condition here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that if the password length is less than 8, then we want to add a text, a caption saying that the password is too short. Okay, and we do that using an if statement. So if I go back to password input value length is less than 8, okay, that's my condition. That's what I want to check here. So to do an if statement, you go if, okay, that's your keyword here. And then you put your condition in normal brackets. Your condition is what you want to check here. You want to check whether your password input value length is less than 8. So if it is, then you want JavaScript to do something. So to enter your action, that's when you use your squiggly brackets. Okay, so often in code, if you, for your condition, for what you want to set something, check something, that would be in normal brackets, and then your condition will be in squiggly brackets here. I want to go to the next line here without running my code. So don't enter. If you go enter, it's going to run your code, okay, and it's going to fail. Go to shift enter to get to the next line without running it. Okay, and see I've opened and closed my squiggly brackets already, so I don't forget to close them, and I'm just going shift enter in between so that I can enter my next line here. So if my password input value length is less than 8, then I want my password caption dot inner text to say, and then I enter my string here. Your password needs to be at least 8 characters. Character long. Okay. So I run this and I don't get anything here because my password is more than 8. So if I reduce that, oops, not too much, and I run that again, now you can see it not only here in the console, but also in the caption. Okay, so with my if element, I've checked my condition here, my value length, and then I've created that option here. Okay, if I go and enter a longer password and I run it again, you can see here it's not returning the caption, but here it's still here because we've not actually cleared it or anything. Okay, so we're going to clear it first. So I want to have my password caption dot inner text, and I'm just going to set up as an empty string. I could use null here as well to clear it. So now I've cleared my caption. Okay, and so I don't want to have to go and clear my caption in time. So I want to add another condition which says if it's less than 8, then do that. But if it's more than 8, then give me another message which tells me, yeah, that looks good. Okay. So if I take my if statement from before, again, I'm using my arrows just to retrieve what I've typed before. Okay, so I've got my if statement here at the start, and I want to add another condition. So I say if it's less than 8, do this. Otherwise, and otherwise in code is else, do something else. Okay, so else, and then it's an action. So again, it's squiggly brackets here. I go shift enter to go to the next page, to the next line, sorry. And then I'm gonna grab my password caption inner text again, and I'm going to say looks good. Looks good. Okay. So now if I run that, it's saying me looks good because I've got less than 8. If I make it shorter, more than 8, sorry. If I make it shorter and run it again, it's now going to change your password needs to be at least 8 characters long. Okay, so you've got your condition and then your statement. So let's look at that structure here in more details. So that's your condition statement here. So we've seen you've got here you start, and then you've got your condition in your normal brackets. And then if it's true, run that statement. If it's false, just exit the code and just go to the next one. If else, very similar on this side. So same, if it's true, I run that block of codes here. But if it's false, I'm just going to run a different block of codes and then go to the next one. Okay, so again, if condition, code statement A here for your action. Otherwise, so else, your code statement B here. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to check that your password field and confirm password contain the same value. So write an if statement, we've just done that. Then we want to check the passwords match. And then we want to find and store the password confirmation input add caption as a variable. Okay. So let's go back to our page here. So we already have our password input element ID here. Yeah, so we want now to go and get this one here. So same as before, elements, clicky buttons, going to highlight this, and I can see I've got confirm password input as an ID here, and I've got confirm password caption. So I'm going to copy that, go back to my console. Let me clear that so we can see Control L. So variable confirm password input equal document dot get element by ID normal brackets as a string, paste my variable here. Okay, and then I'll check it. It's here. All good. So how it's highlighted here at the same time when I was checking it. And then I need to do the same with my caption. So it was the same. It was confirm password caption. I'm just going to change that as caption. Confirm password caption. Okay, it's here. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. And now I'm going to go and check that I've selected it correctly. Confirm password caption is here. And again, it's highlighted here so you can see it. Okay, so we want to check that the password match. So let's enter, I'm going to enter the word something here, and I'm going to enter the word some here. Okay, so we want to go and access the value of that. So we can't see it here, but we can see it on our JavaScript side. So it's a user input. So you're going to go with password input dot value as we've already done before. So you can see I've entered something, and then confirm password input dot value some. Okay, so we want to check if those two are the same. So we want to say password input dot value equal confirm password input dot value, right? Because we want to check they're the same. So if I run that here, look at my page here. When I run it, oh, this has shortened now, okay? Because we've not actually checked whether they were the same. We've used equal, and remember your equal, what it means? It means that you want to set the things on the left equal to the thing on the right. So basically now they're both saying some instead. Okay, so how do we compare it instead of overwriting? What we do is that we use triple equal instead. That's how you check whether they're the same. And you can see straight away, it tells me, yes, it's true, because now they're set at the same. I can also check whether they are not equal to. And to do that, I just replace my first equal by an exclamation mark. And this I mean not, because here they are the same. Okay, so we've checked whether the password match. And now we want to write an if statement for matching password. Okay, so if, enter your condition in normal brackets, and your condition that you want to check if your password input value is not equal to your comfort password input value. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that here. Okay, then, so my action, squiggly brackets, open and close. I'm going to go Shift Enter to go to the next line. Then I want my confirm password caption inner text to say your passwords don't match. Need to close that, okay? And then I also want them to say if it matches. So I'm going to go otherwise, so else. The action I want you to take, so squiggly brackets, Shift Enter here is, I'm just going to grab that again, here, and I'm going to say good to go. Okay, so let's try that. Here you go, they match, so good to go. If I make them different, I'm going to rerun that. As I mean, your passwords don't match. Okay, so again, you've got your if, you've got your condition here, then you've got your code statement here, and then you've got your else condition again. No, sorry, else and your other code statement here. Okay. So we've seen here lots of true and false statements here. So we said earlier we would go back to Booleans. So that's what Booleans data types are. It's a separate type of data that JavaScript interpret, and it can only accommodate two values, true or false. Okay? And in the next exercise, we understand that a bit better. So let's look now at the next element in our form, which is here. I'm at least 13 years old. Okay, so we want to find and store the age input and caption as a variable. We want to check whether that box is ticked. And then we want to write an if-else statement for the age requirement. Okay, so go to your elements, squiggly buttons. Okay, and if you're over here, so if you go here, you won't be able to find it directly just because it's hiding behind here. So if you go on, I'm at least 13 years old. Okay, highlight that here. If you go up just one line here under ID, you've got age input. That's the one we want. And see if I, oops, sorry, if I go on this here, you can see that's your actual checkbox here, which is highlighted. So that's the right ID. So let's grab our age input here. Okay. And same as before, we also have an age caption here, which you can see highlighted on the page. And you can see you've got a small space here on your form too. So we're going to clear that, Control L. So variable age input equal document dot get element by ID brackets a quotation mark. Okay, yeah, got it. So we've got this one. We want to check it, age input here, and then we want to do the same with my age caption, age caption. Yeah. Nope, not that. And I've got my age caption here. Okay, so we've stored our variables, so now we can use them. So we're going to use an if statement to check if that box is ticked or not. Okay, so that's a user input. The user is the one who has to check and uncheck that box. So let's try age input dot value. And when I type that, it tells me it's on. Okay, but when I look at that, it's not on here. So let's try and tick it, run it again. It's still telling me it's on. Okay, so value with checkbox, what it checks whether there is a checkbox anywhere here within the form. Okay, so from the moment you've got checkbox here, it's always going to return on. It's not checking whether it is ticked or not. To check this, you need to use, simply enough, checked. Age input dot checked. If I enter that, it's saying me false. Now I'm going to tick it, run it again, and saying me it's true. Okay, so that's how you check whether your box is checked or not. And if you go Actually, you go and check type of age input dot checked. See, it's a Boolean value here. Okay, so because you switch here, your box is either on or off, it's so checked or not checked. Okay, so now we've seen all the primitive data types. So last bit in this practice here, practice 8, is to write an if statement to check whether that box is checked or not. So if age input dot checked. Okay, that's my condition. Then I want to enter my action, squiggly brackets, shift enter. So if it is checked, okay, so check means when it's ticked, it's true. Okay, so if it is checked, I want my age caption dot inner text equal you're good to go. Otherwise, else here, the action I wanted to take, so squiggly brackets, shift enter to go to the next line, is I'm just going to take that again so I don't have to type it, is going to be what did we say, 13. You must be at least 13 to play. Okay. So if I run that here, saying me you're good to go here, you've got in the caption here, and take it, run it again. You must be, obviously there's typo, but you must be at least 13 to play. Okay, so now that we understand how the form can be used, we might want to add some other checks here. We can check, for instance, if the username which we have selected is unique. Okay, so that's the last part here in our MOOC. So we're going to look at loops. Loops are really handy when you want to execute a block of code multiple times. With the while loop here, you saying that while a condition is taking place, you want to loop the code. So as long as that condition remains true, it's going to check it. Is it still true? Yeah, it's going to keep running like this. When that condition is not true anymore, then it's just going to exit and go to the next one. And you can see your structure here, which is why condition in normal brackets, and then your action in your squiggly brackets. And you've got an example here. And we'll use that in the practice in a minute, so you get to understand that a bit better. We also have for loops. For loops are very similar, but you use these when you know the number of times you want it to run. So you start at this point for this condition to do this. So here you can see, for instance, you've got your begin part. So you set the variables before the loop starts. And then you've got your condition, test condition, which defines the condition for the loop to run. And then you've got your step part, which is executed every time the code blocks run. So each time you go back to your step and then again you loop. And you can see your syntax here is a bit different. So let's see at how that works. So we're going first to look at our username, and we're going to revisit for this the array. Okay, so let's go back to our console. I'm going to clear that, Control L. Okay, so we've seen all our primitive data, and we've also already touched on arrays here, which are your objects. And with arrays, you can list lots of data together in a long chain, and then you can refer to it as a single whole. So they're declared same as other variables, just var is a variable, and we're going to call this one users list equal, and the structure for arrays, remember, are a square bracket. So square brackets, and you put comma in between. So here we're going to say we've got a list of users in which we've got Emily, and we've got Jane, and we've got Kim. Okay. So check, you've got your square brackets, you've got your comma, you've got your quotes. Run that. So now if I go users list, here I've got my array. And we've seen that before. You've got your array here, you've got your index, and remember it starts at 0 here, and you've got your length. To check your length so that you can use that, you can actually go users list dot length. And it's going to tell you there are 3 items in that list here. And we've seen before, you can go and select one in your list here. So for instance, if I want the one in second position, I'm going to go users list, square brackets here, and I'm going to go 1, okay? Because remember, it starts at 0. So the second position is number 1 in my index. And it's telling me the second one in my list here is Jane. Okay, so we want to check if that username is taken. Okay, we want to write if statements to do that. So let's clear our caption here for username because we're going to need that. So username caption dot inner text equal, just set it up like that. So that caption now is empty here. Okay, so we're going to check our username against that list. So if, then my condition, I want to check if my username input dot value is equal, remember triple equal here because we want to check whether they're the same, to the to the first element in my array. Okay, I need to do it one by one here. So I go in my square bracket, I go 0, that's my first element. Okay, and if they are the same, squiggly brackets, shift enter. If they are the same, I'm going to add a caption. So username caption dot inner text equal, and let's use an interpolation. So backstick, sorry, the username, and then you want to add username input value. So dollar sign, squiggly brackets. And within that, you can type you can type username input dot value. Yep. So what we're saying, sorry, the username is already taken. Okay, so if it's in that list here, it means it's already taken. Don't forget your backstick here to close, and you can run that. So here it's not a match here because in my position 0 here, I've got Emily. If I change that to Emily and I run it, then now I'm getting that. So in order to check my whole array, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to write another if statement here. And then in my users list, I'm going to change my position here, my counter. I'm going to change it to 1 to go to the next one in the list. And I'm going to run that again. And then I'm going to have to do the same again for my counter 2 and so forth. So if I've got 200 users, I don't want to have to write 200 if statements. Okay, so that's where your loops comes in. So we want to write a for loop to automate the above task. So before we do that with our username, I'm going to use an example with alert to explain a bit more how the for and while loop works. Okay, so if I clear that, so let's say you wanted to create an alert which counts down from 5 to 1 and go at the end. So you could go alert, 5. I'm going to, I've done shift enter here just to go to the next line without running it. 4, shift enter, I'm just going to go and change them after. So 5, 4, 3, oops, 2, 1, and I'm going to say go here. Okay, so when I enter that, I've got 5, and each time I press enter to go the OK, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so that's one way you could do that. But instead of writing it individually, because again, depending on the length of your list, that could become very painful, then you want to use a while loop to automate it. So we saw that in each of the if statement we wrote for our username here, the only thing which was changing was our counter. So the first thing we want to do is set up a counter as a variable for a while loop. So we're going to go var I. So counters in programming I often refer to as I. Okay, that's recognized in the code. If someone reads that in your code, they know what you mean. So we go var I equal 5 because that will be our starting point. We're starting our countdown at 5. Okay, and then I'm going to enter my y. So y, remember the structure y, and then you've got your condition in normal brackets here. So y I is more than 0. Oops, what did I type here? Y more than 0. Okay, so this counter here. Then remember to enter shift enter here, because if you run your code when you've not finished your condition, you might end up with having a code just looping forever. Okay, so shift enter. So I'm going to open and close my squiggly brackets here, and I'm going to enter my action. So shift enter. So y is more than 0. I want an alert with I here. So whatever numbers we add, so whatever counter we add here, that's what's going to appear in my alert here, as we've seen earlier. So alert I, and then shift enter again. How are you going to make it count down each time? So you need to add another step which says I equal I minus 1. Okay, so if you look at that, it's saying, for instance, we start 5. So it's going to check, is 5 more than 0? Yes, it is. So it's going to display alert 5, and then it's going to go 5 minus 1, 4. And then it's going to loop back. Is 4 less than 0? Yes, it is, and so on. Okay, so let's run this. And then you can see you've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So with 4, the difference is that it recognizes where it needs to start. Okay, we know how we know the start condition on your 4. So the difference is we're going to go 4, and then you have first var I equal 5 here. yi is more than 0. And then step we wanted to take is each time the loop is run is same, I equal I minus 1, so that it goes down. Okay, and then squiggly brackets here, shift enter, and I want it to go alert I. Okay, and my step is already here. Okay, so I'm just going to add that here, and then shift enter here. What I'm going to add actually that I didn't have before was my alert go at the end too. Okay, so it's going to loop each time 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's going to check, and once it's not true anymore, once it's not more than 0, then it's going to go to the next line, which is alert go. It's going to exit the loop and go to the next line. Okay, so let's try and run this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. So that's how the loops work. So now let's go and apply that to our username input. Okay, so same structure. We're going to go 4. And here, we're not going to count down because we don't know how many users we've got in that array. Okay, we could have 200, could have 300. That's going to change all the time. So instead, we're going to start from 0 and go up that list. So we're going to set I at 0. And the condition is the way we're going to know once we've reached the end of your list is that we're going to check your user list length. So while your counter here is less than your total user list length, we're going to run that loop. And then at each step, instead of going down, we're going to go up. So we're going I plus 1. Okay, make sure you've got your bracket closed, then squiggly brackets, shift, enter. So why is doing that? We want to say that if the username input value is equal to any of those items in your arrays, then we want the caption. So within your for statement, you're going to add an if statement. So if, and then same structure as we used before for your if. Okay, so the conditions in normal brackets, and you want to say username input dot value equal to users list, and then you're going to enter your counter as your index position here. Yeah, so if there's a match with that user in the list as we go through each one of them one by one, then that's when you will want to have your caption. So you enter your action, squiggly brackets here, shift enter, and your username caption dot inner text equal, and then we're going to do an interpolation. Sorry, the username username input dot value is already taken. Backstack. We've closed. Remember, make sure you've got all your brackets closed. We've closed everything. And then we're going to run that. So I've not cleared my caption. Let me just clear my caption so that we can actually see the outcome here. Username, caption, inner text. Oops, here you go. 0 here. So let's run that again. And see, because we've got Emily in the list here, it says your username is already taken. Okay, if I clear my caption again, I'm going to enter, oops, I'm not going to enter that here. I'm going to enter that here. I'm going to enter Adeline. If I run it again, I don't get the caption. But if I enter, well, we had Kim on the list as well, so different position here. If I run this again, now I'm getting the caption. So regardless of where it is in that array, it's going to check them one by one and then give you that caption here if there's a match. Okay, so that actually rounds up our session for tonight. So I hope you enjoyed it first. Hopefully this gave you some flavor and understanding of how JavaScript works. I know there's a lot of content, so don't panic if you do not follow absolutely everything tonight. That's completely normal when you go through this the first time. So the recording will be available and you have the code share too, so you can refer to that as well and look at the codes in your own time. So just to reiterate, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript go hand in hand, and JavaScript is a programming language which is available through a web browser by default. So whether you're going to do that as a hobby or professionally, as you can see, I'm sure you can see that now, it will open lots of opportunities. You can use it on your personal blog for personal events, but you can also use it professionally. So, from a small business to anyone looking for a website, this is a useful skill. So just enjoy it, because it's never too late to learn new skills. Finally, a big thank you to Paige, Sophia, Mark, and Gerard for managing the chat window. And the best of luck. So I'll now hand over to Pauline from Code4 Girls.
Thank you so much for that. That was incredible. I actually haven't done JavaScript in the past few months now, so this was a really great refresher for me as well. Great job. Thank you so much. I'm really inspired to build something in JavaScript again and revisit it. So thank you. If no one has any questions in the chat, I'm just looking, and we are running out of time. So if you do have any questions about the course, about the MOOC, or Code4 Girls in general, get in touch with us. Give us a follow on, to stay up to date with all the different opportunities there are. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and recently TikTok. So feel free to follow us there. I'm also more than happy to chat with anyone about getting into tech, and of course, Code4 Girls and this MOOC. Find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Pauline Navas. And that is it. That wraps up our MOOC for tonight. Thank you once again, Adeline. That was fantastic. And the rest of the Dell Technologies team for their time this evening. Have a lovely rest of your evening, folks. See you again soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.